All right. So last week we went over chapter 17, which was the destruction of the religious establishment or the religious Babylon. Excuse me. So we watched how, or as God destroyed the religious establishment, and so in this chapter 18 here, we read of his destruction of the economic establishment. So, or the commercial Babylon. So today, commercial interests control the world, and they are the power brokers. They put politicians into office, which we see, and we're going to be coming up with another election season shortly. They sit in their comfort, never imagining that they will have to pay for their abuse of power, but God will destroy them in a day. And we often say about material things, it's all going to burn someday. So this will be the day when it all burns. So we will see that coming up here. So a little introduction. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, of course. Excuse me. A little introduction announcing the fall of Babylon. So is this the same Babylon described in chapter 17? And some scholars see this issue differently. Some point to two manifestations of Babylon, one of the religious and one of the commercial or material. Others see the two as one, both being judged at the same time. And there are definite similarities between Babylon as described in Revelation 17 and here in chapter 18. Both are under the rule of the Antichrist and have ruling queens, and both are filled with blasphemy, and both hate the saints, and they shed their blood, and both are associates with kings in fornication, and both are under judgment and destroyed. However, there are also some significant differences. So we had Mystery Babylon in the last chapter, 17. And so the symbol was the harlot woman. And it was identified with Rome. There was a woman, the whore, the mother. It was guilty of religious abominations. And it was destroyed by political power that previously supported her. And so in this second version, the commercial Babylon here, the symbol is the great city, and it's identified as a port city or being on a coastal city. Its habitation is the great city or the marketplace, and it's guilty of greed and self-indulgence, and it will be destroyed by a sudden act of God. So it is best to see them as intertwined yet somewhat distinct. Religious Babylon of chapter 17 is judged at the midpoint of the 7-year period or tribulation. And then this commercial Babylon is judged here at the end of this period of the tribulation. This breadth in prophecy shouldn't surprise us. Think of the Old Testament, or what the Old Testament says about the first coming of the Messiah. Micah said the Messiah would come out of Bethlehem. Hosea says that the Messiah would come out of Egypt. And Malachi said that the Messiah would come to the temple. Zechariah said the Messiah would come to Zion. And Isaiah said that the Messiah would come to Galilee. So which of these is true? And they are all true. So it isn't strange at all to say that Babylon is falling, and to mean it in two senses, religious and commercial Babylon, and at two different times, the middle of the Great Tribulation and here at the end of the Great Tribulation. So this passage is very much in the style of Old Testament prophecies of doom regarding wicked cities. And two examples of this are Babylon, as seen in Isaiah 13 and Isaiah 21, and then also in Jeremiah 50 and 51. And then the the destruction of Tyre in Ezekiel 26 through 28. So John here is caught up in the spirit again, or he is in the spirit of the prophetic doom songs. So is Babylon of chapter 18 here a literal, or is it a symbolic city? And some have thought it to be the future rebuilt Babylon on the Euphrates River in the Middle East. This is now a desolate desert in modern day Iraq. Many years ago, remember Saddam Hussein, he was outspoken in his desire to resurrect the ruined city of Babylon in all of its glory. And he obviously failed, but it is conceivable that a rebuilt Babylon could be a world economic center, especially in the wealth of the Middle East oil. So far, Hussein and any other leader has not made good on the dream to rebuild Babylon, but they're trying. I believe that, in fact, I used to think that this would have been a rebuilt city of Babylon, the literal sense of it says the city of Babylon. But as of this morning, I changed my mind after reading Isaiah 13. And Isaiah 13 talks about the destruction of Babylon, that it would be destroyed and wouldn't be rebuilt, the actual city. So Isaiah 13, 19 through 22 says, and Babylon, the beauty of kingdoms, the glory of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. And it will never be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation. Nor will the Arab pitch his tent there, and nor will shepherds make their flocks lie down there. But desert creatures will lie down there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches also will live there, and shaggy goats will frolic there, and hyenas will howl in their fortified towers, and jackals in the luxurious palaces. Her fateful time also will soon come, and her days will not be prolonged. So that was already fulfilled in the destruction of Babylon. And so I believe this is going to be a figurative city. It could be Rome, it could be New York City, or it could be just the symbolic system in itself of the Babylonian system. So most likely commercial Babylon is symbolic, like religious Babylon. And when the Lord was here on earth, he spoke of the great hatred that the world had for him and his own. And what is this world but a combination of religion, government, and commerce? In other words, Babylon in all its parts stands for that which Christ called the world. In portraying the destruction of a symbolic city, he describes God's judgment on the great satanic system of evil that has corrupted the earth's history. And so we see as an acceleration of knowledge, let's say over the last 100 years, we've seen, as knowledge has increased, we've had communication has increased, even starting back with like the printing press. So we were able to print books and print Bibles. And more recently, with the advent of TV and radio from the 20s through the 40s, we've seen communication, and we've also seen a system where, the word commercial, we see TV commercials, and that fills us with a desire to purchase a product. So we have this commercialism that's brought into society now. In chapter 18, the context seems to indicate that Babylon here is viewed in its political and economic character rather than its religious aspect. Excuse me. So the announcement of a glorious angel. So we start in 18, verse 1, and 1 through 3, and we'll dissect that. So Verse 1 says, "After these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury." So, the illuminated with his glory. So this is this angel coming down from heaven is so fresh from God's presence that he glows. And so recently has he come from the presence of God that in his passing he flings a broad belt of light across the dark earth. And you might remember in Exodus when Moses actually met with God, and he came down from the mountain with glowing from God's presence. He had that Shekinah glory from meeting God face to face. And so it'll be like the same thing. From the presence of God is going to shine this light through this angelic being, or this angel. The term another, or the Greek is alon, makes it clear that this angel is the same in kind as the angel of chapter 17, verse 1. So we had the angel that possibly they thought could have been Jesus, an angelic being. Here we have the same type of angelic being. So he says, Babylon the Great is fallen. And he announces that Babylon is fallen, and the phrase repeated is like a solemn dirge of the damned. It becomes a dwelling place of demons. A sad fate for a once great city. This is a prophetic picture of absolute desolation, where the proud achievements of man become the demonic haunts of unclean and horrible creatures. The abundance of her luxury. So Babylon's sin was not only idolatry, referred to with the term fornication, but it's also the sin of pride and greed and selfishly held wealth. Okay, so moving on, let's go through verse 4 and 5. And this will be the call to God's people to separate from Babylon. So verse 4 reads, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities." So come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins is it's inconceivable that a child of God could be a part of the religious Babylon, though elements may creep in. But the commercial Babylon, with its materialistic lure, is a constant threat to be guarded against. And like I said earlier, we've had the last 100 years or so of materialism, through TV and radio, and of the 40s and the 50s, and then it seemed to take on an all new onslaught during the 60s, as we saw with the music and just everything that was going on, movies and whatnot. So there was that whole lure of materialism, free sex, and just everything was promoted. It seems like it accelerated in the 60s through today. So it says, lest you receive of her plagues. So the warning is focused towards saints who are in the position, such as Lot, while he was, as he lived in the city of Sodom, found in Genesis 19. So these are God's people in a place they shouldn't be in, a place a place which is ripe for destruction. And so who these people are, tribulation saints, or the Jewish people. I don't know who they are because at this point, we should have most of the tribulation saints have been executed. So who knows who these people are, but they're still a remnant of God's people, and they are possibly lured into this system. Now we know that they couldn't buy, sell, or trade either without the mark. So who are these people? These people that are God's people that He asked to come out and be a part, separate from. So He says, "Come out of her," and the call to depart from Babylon and the worldliness that it represents is a theme repeated frequently in the scriptures. So depart, or go out from there, touch no unclean thing, or go out from her and be clean, you who bear the vessels of the Lord. Isaiah 52:11 reads. And moving on, so we have the kings of the earth who committed. Nope, I'm past. I missed a page here. So let me. 52:11. Okay, so and then the next would be to flee from the midst of Babylon and everyone save his life. So that would be found in Jeremiah 50. My people go out of the midst of her, and let everyone deliver himself from the fierce anger of the Lord. Jeremiah 51:45. Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. So for what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? 2 Corinthians 6:14. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. Ephesians 5:11. So for her sins have reached heaven. So the sins of commercial Babylon have piled up like a tower, the Tower of Babel. And so what are the sins? The commercial push for the LGBTQ, murder of innocent children, so on and so forth. So what are these sins? The murder of the saints. So God has remembered her iniquities, and this is the destiny for the materialistic world. But towards believers, God says, "I will remember their sins no more." So we have that promise. Moving on to verse 6. So this would be a call to those who carry out Babylon's judgment. Verse 6 reads, "Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mix double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I am no widow, and will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine. And she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her." So rendered to her just as she rendered to you. The ancient Greek word for render is apodidom. Oh boy, I knew I was going to mess that up. Apodidami, which means literally to pay a debt or to give back which is due. And God will give back, or give Babylon exactly what she deserves. So repay her double according to her works. And double restitution was required in the Old Testament in cases of theft. And this perhaps could be a commentary on how Babylon has made her wealth, and which would have been through dishonest dealings. So then it says, repay her double according to her works. So this passage presents a threefold sin. The first is self-indulgence, where she lived luxuriously. And then the second is pride. She glorified herself, or sits as a queen. And then third, avoidance of suffering. So she said, I am no widow, I will not see sorrow. And all these things are characteristic of worldliness and materialism. So therefore her plagues will not come in one day, or therefore her plagues will come in one day, and the destruction of commercial Babylon will come suddenly with the completeness which is utterly burned with fire. So then the next section of the chapter is about the lament for commercial Babylon. So verses 9 and 10, the kings will be lamenting. And so are these are kings, the 10 kings or the 10 nations, or are they other king type people? So it says in verse 9, the kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her. And when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And so, standing at a distance for fear of her torment. So so great is the heat and smoke of her burning that these kings must stand at a distance. And some think this may be an indication of a nuclear weapon or nuclear explosion has been used in the judgment of these commercial centers. So whether this is to be understood as a literal destruction of the city, like Rome, by fire, is surely doubtful considering the mystical character of the whole prophecy. So then again, I say, was it literal Babylon, or was it, could it be New York City, or is it a system in general? So, alas, alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city. So with a touch of with grim humor, he paints them as standing at a safe distance from the destruction and contenting themselves with idle lamentations. Verse 11, so the lament of the merchants. So we had the kings lamenting, and now we have the merchants. So 11 through 17, and the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore, which is merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil. We have fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep and horses and chariots. And then it says the bodies and souls of men. So the fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things who became rich by her will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. So let's dissect this section. The merchants of gold and silver. So this long list needs little explanation, except to note that all of these are luxuries, and none of them are necessities. It is plain that the mourning is rooted in self-interest, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. The combined picture is one of complete abandonment to the wealth of this world and complete disregard of the God who gave it. And sometimes when you have a lot of things, it's easy to forget about the Lord. So when you have plenty, you tend to forget the Lord. When you have little, it seems that's when you start seeking the Lord again. So here is the the bodies and souls of men. So it wasn't only just merchandise, as we mentioned up above, but also the prophets of commercial Babylon have come through cruelly by using others, and they sold the bodies and souls of men. So this idea has many applications. Nonetheless, so then today's widespread of human trafficking and prostitution, pornography. I believe there's also going to be slavery. So we will see human slavery. So moving on, it says, "You shall not find you shall find them no more at all, and those who lived for all the luxuries of commercial Babylon will be tormented. Their eternal absence of those luxuries all the more. You shall find them no more at all." So ultimately, hell will be the place of unfulfilled desire. So moving on to continuing with 17 through 19, now we have lament of the sea captains. So 17 continues, "Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, 'What is like this great city?' They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing, and saying, 'Alas, alas, that great city, in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she is made desolate.' So alas, alas, the great city in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth." Again, is a little comment needs to be made on this, other than to notice that their sorrow at the commercial Babylon's fall is selfish. Verse 20, "Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her." So rejoicing over her, should God's people rejoice when judgment comes? And the answer is yes. But we don't rejoice in the destruction and judgment, but rather we rejoice in the righteous resolution of God's judgment, or that God's judgment brings. And so we have the finale of commercial Babylon's death knell, the third part here. So verse 21, an angel graphically shows Babylon's fall. So 21 reads, "Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it in the sea, saying, 'Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found any more.'" So this mighty angel who took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, this is reminiscent of Jeremiah's instructions to Sariah to bind a stone to the text of Jeremiah and cast it into the Euphrates. "And thus Babylon shall Babylon sink, and shall not rise from the evil that I will bring upon her, and they shall be weary." That would be Jeremiah 51, 61 through 64. But it also reminds us of what Jesus said in Matthew 18:6, that whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea. So this applies to Babylon here in Revelation 18, because she led others into sin. And it's a terrible thing to sin unto yourself, but it's also even more terrible to lead others into sin. "So the great city Babylon shall be thrown down and shall not be found anymore." Someday this world system is going to pass away like a great stone falls to the bottom of the sea. And will this fall hurt us? We will only be hurt to the extent that we invest ourselves into the mentality of commercial Babylon's materialism and worldliness. Verses 22 and 23, we see Babylon is left desolate and powerless. So, and this section I find interesting because this has to do with musicians. And so, verse 22 says, "The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard in you anymore." Or guitarists, Ronnie. "No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you anymore. And the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you anymore. And the light of a lamp shall not shine in you anymore. And the voice of a bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you anymore. For your merchants were the great men of the earth. For your sorcery, all the nations were deceived." So here we have, they shall not be heard and shall not be found, and they shall to be heard in you anymore. So they shall not shine in you anymore. So it's a graphic and poetic language. John describes how the industry and commerce of Babylon will come to an end. Personally, I find it interesting that they list the music, which I would tend to think of the music industry or entertainment industry, which in itself, how many of you remember hearing about the book, The Hollywood Babylon? Or I think they even made a movie of Hollywood Babylon years ago. Yeah. So in a sense, that whole scene, the entertainment industry as a whole is a Babylon system. I mean, the way it uses people up, the drug abuse, the satanic rituals involved. So, anyways, we will see the music industry and the entertainment industry in itself come to an end at some point. So, for your sorcery, or for by your sorcery, all the nations were deceived. And so, sorcery in the Greek, the word is pharmakia, which means to prepare drugs. So one of the things is the lure of the commercial Babylon is like a drug addiction, fed by deceptive advertising. So we even see this today with alcohol, on TV. Alcohol is a drug. So we'll see illegal drugs, and we will see prescription drugs probably in an increase. I would say you would probably see illegal drugs such as we've seen marijuana become legalized over the last few years. We'll probably see other opiate type drugs become legalized during this period. So pharmakia, which is sorcery. So it's sorcery is a sin. We know that in a lot of these witchcraft type rituals, shamanism, they use drugs to induce spirits and things along those lines. So at any rate, we're going to see that. Moving on to 24, verse 24. So the ultimate reason for commercial Babylon's judgment is that she has killed the prophets and the saints. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints, and of all who were slain on the earth. So the blood of the prophets and the saints, and of all who were slain on the earth. The extent of this charge is an indication that this great city is symbolic of the world system at large. There is no one literal city that is responsible for all who were slain on the earth. In her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints. So this means that God takes the persecution of his people from a personal offense, and those who attack his people really attack him. And so there we have, and it was actually pretty quick tonight, we have chapter 18.